Welcome to the evening show with Jackie Brambles. This is the home of great conversations with your favourite artists of the 70s, 80s and 90s. Tonight, we're talking to one of the UK's finest jazz vocalists, but she first strayed into the mainstream in the 80s when she joined Jimmy Somerville and Richard Coles, aka the Communards, for a taste of pop stardom and top of the chart success, as you just heard her on our opening track, Don't Leave Me This Way. So welcome to Sarah J. Morris.
Hello, lovely. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you, and intrigued to hear about this fascinating new project of yours. It's all about some of the greatest female singer-songwriters of all time. It's called The Sisterhood, and it's getting its public debut tomorrow night at Cadogan Hall in London. Before we deep dive into that, let's talk a little bit about the track we played to open the Great Conversation Hour, and that whirlwind time that you enjoyed with the Communards when you were such an integral part of the massive number one that they had with Don't Leave Me This Way in 1986. So how did you come to be a part of the band?
I knew Richard Coles from the age of, he was 16, a few years younger than me, and he did the same drama course that I did in Stratford-on-Avon. It was kind of a technical college that had the first theatre and education course in the country. Richard brought Jimmy along to see me because one of my songs with a band called The Republic had been very big in the gay clubs, and I was singing in a mock operatic voice to a Middle Eastern dance beat. Jimmy bought that EP, and so Richard said, "Come along and meet Sarah Jane." So he brought Jimmy along we were doing a benefit for the miners after the miners' strike was over in Brixton, and brought Jimmy along. I, of course, knew him from Bronski Beat.
Yeah.
We got on like a house on fire immediately. And the fact that he was a very petite, red-headed man with a very high voice, and I was a very tall, red-headed woman with a very low voice, already was quite entertaining. But he made me laugh so much. And Richard always has made me laugh. You know, he's one of the funniest men I know. And then he asked if I'd like to do a duet across the road to where I was living. I was living in Brixton. There was a Gaze the Word bookshop event at the Fridge in Brixton.
Yeah.
And they were promoting You're My World at this point, and long before mobile phones. So unless you got somebody on a phone at home, you didn't get hold of them.
Yeah.
I think it was almost the night before I got hold of them to say, what is it that we're going to be doing, by the way? And they had no time to think about it. And I said, I have this great idea about why don't we cover and duet a Billie Holiday song called Lover Man, so that we're both singing about the same guy. And they thought that was a great idea. We performed it. The audience went crazy. The record company was in the audience. Suddenly I'm being asked to go to America to record the album.
I don't know why, but I'm feeling so sad.
That's Lover Man, the song that tonight's special guest Sarah J. Morris sang the very first time she ever worked with Jimmy Somerville at a fundraising event. It went down so well that night with the crowd, the band and the record label who were watching that they asked you, Sarah Jane, to come to America immediately to record a whole album with them. And that track, Lover Man, then actually ended up on the album. So it was a real whirlwind Cinderella type story for you to start with, that one gig changing your life overnight.
I was cleaning people's houses in the daytime, and I was a waitress, silver service waitress, in order to be able to sing.
Yeah.
I got on and started saving up my money for the flight. I didn't know record companies paid to go to America. I was that naive.
That's so sweet.
And it was a brilliant combination, Jimmy, Richard and I. And I know it's a long, long time ago, but Jimmy lives an hour from me and Richard now lives a half an hour from me. So I'm still very close to them. Every year I do the Rewind Festival with Jimmy, and Richard came to my concert only a couple of weeks ago, and he'll be at Cadogan Hall.
Aww.
So we're all still really good friends. June Miles Kingston was the drummer. She lives in Brighton too. Sally Herbert, who was in the Communards in the string section, she's written some of the string arrangements for the Sisterhood. She'll be there performing with me for the Sinead O'Connor song. You know, we're all still a big family.
Oh, it's always lovely to hear that those relationships formed in the headiest of times have sustained themselves over the piece. And it sounds like you had such a joyful experience back then when you were part of a number one band and travelling the world and, of course, going on Top of the Pops.
But during the time of the Communards, I remember I think the first time we went to do Top of the Pops, we did Roland Rat in the afternoon.
Ah, remember Roland Rat? That's big time.
Well, it's just big time. So we went from that to then Top of the Pops. And it's a much smaller studio than you imagine. And then it was a period. I know that Top of the Pops went in and out of having live vocals and mimed vocals, but our period was the mimed vocal, and we could both sing. And we got a bit bored about, because we were number one for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
We were on each week. And on the last time we were there, I don't know whether that was why we started sliding back down the charts, but I don't think we even talked about it. We just did it. We both mimed to each other's voice. And I think that was our way of saying, hey,
we're not into this.
Is my vote.
Yeah.
We were called over the coals, by the director and told, had we not been at number one, that might not have been aired.
Oh, that was a bit naughty. I expect there were a few naughty moments, weren't there, out on the road with Jimmy and Richard?
The first time as the Communards, we went over and did something called Festival Bar in Italy. It's where you perform in the Verona Arena, so that's one of the most famous places in Italy.
Yeah.
And we did that with Frankie Goes to Hollywood. That was a crazy, crazy time. You can imagine those guys. It was great party time.
And how about a full circle moment where you got to meet a particular musical hero?
One of the most amazing things was one of the people that made such an impression on me was Dusty Springfield, because I met her and we were both doing the same TV program.
Right.
And my Mrs. Jones, which was my first solo single after the Communards, it had been banned because people worried that it was a lesbian song because I didn't change it to me and Mr. Jones. And she came up to me at the back of the TV and said, "It'll soon be history, darling, and you just be who you want to be." So I met Dusty. That was huge.
Number one in 1987 for the Pet Shop Boys and Dusty Springfield, a musical hero of tonight's special guest, Sarah Jane Morris of Communards fame. And we will be back to continue our great conversation with Sarah Jane next. Welcome back to the evening show with Jackie Brambles, where it's just you and me and our special guest, Sarah Jane Morris, who shot to fame with the Communards, cozying on in for a great conversation. So, Sarah Jane, let's talk about this fascinating new project of yours. You're performing it at Cadogan Hall in London tomorrow night, for those who'd love to go along. It's called the Sisterhood. What exactly is the Sisterhood?
To get me through the second lockdown, I thought I'd really like to find out about the lives of female singer-songwriters that paved the way for somebody like me.
Right.
And I actually chose about 50, because, there are so many out there. And in the end, it came down to 10, because by that point, I was sort of thinking of passing the torch from generation to generation.
Right.
And my list was Bessie Smith, Billie Holiday, Nina Simone, Miriam Makeba, Aretha Franklin, Janis Joplin, Joni Mitchell, Rickie Lee Jones, Annie Lennox, and Kate Bush. And Kate Bush is 1 year older than me, so in my head, she was passing the torch to me and I was passing it on.
Oh, I love that.
But since I've written these songs, one of the women two of the women that were very definitely in the, the larger picture, but I had to take it down to being 10 for an album, were Patti Smith and, of course, Sinead O'Connor.
Oh.
And since Sinead is now no longer with us, but I knew her and I worked with her, I've written 2 more songs, which will be extra tracks next year.
Right.
But they are also going to be the encore for our show at Cadogan Hall.
Before we talk about some of these women individually and what you learned about them along the way, what's almost equally fascinating to me is the highly innovative way in which you raised funds to complete the recording of the Sisterhood. You used bartering to make it happen, right? And you opened up your home as a sort of artistic B&B. You invited people in to do masterclasses with you.
I've done a lot of bartering on this album, Sisterhood, to try and finance it. Because, of course, Brexit had come along. My careers in Europe, it had really damaged that for me. And then COVID, no earnings.
Of course.
So I finance all my own records. I release it on my own label, Fallen Angel Records. And I had no money. So I had to think outside the box as to how to even finance this. So what I did was I booked a studio, finding out how much it was going to cost for 4 days, thinking that's the shortest period of time we could put these songs down.
Yeah.
Knew how much I had to raise a month hence. So I went round to all of my friends in the neighbourhood. I live in St Leonards-on-Sea, by the way, Hastings.
Right.
If people would let us have their room for, a small amount of money, if I provided breakfast. I knew then how many rooms I'd got. I put an advert on Facebook and I said, does anyone want to come down to St Leonards for the weekend? Accommodation provided, food provided. I will teach you 3-part backing vocal harmonist, 4 of my songs that you will sing at Ronnie Scott's with me in a month's time.
Wow.
It's sold out in an hour.
What a great idea.
It provided the money for that first 4 days in the studio. I bartered with Guy Chambers, the wonderful songwriter who wrote with Robbie Williams, that has produced loads of people.
Yeah.
I did sessions for him, particularly one for David Walliams' musical about an old people's home.
Right.
And in return, rather than an ask for payment, he gave me a studio time, so I was able to do my lead voice that way.
You are clever.
I did songwriting weekends, residential ones in my home where my husband cooked, and Tony and I taught people, helped them finish off their songs. My husband, who's an artist, did fine art weekends where people came here to learn how to paint, how to draw. He drew pictures of all of these singers. We framed them, we sold them. You name it, we've done it to try to get the album to be finished.
Talk about where there's a will, there's a way. And it all worked. I know the album is coming out on International Women's Day next year in March, but let's take a listen to the first single to be released. This is your ode to Rickie Lee Jones, right?
Yeah.
And it's called Jazz Side of the Road.
You waved your freak flag proudly, and you laughed at the observer in the headlights down the jazz side of the road.
That's Jazz Side of the Road by Sarah Jane Morris, the first single from her new album, The Sisterhood, where you have compiled this list of inspirational female singer-songwriters that you feel have sort of passed the torch on from one to the other through the generations. And just to clarify for the audience, these are women that you have been inspired and influenced by.
Yeah.
And you researched their life and then were inspired to write an original piece of music with them in mind in their particular genre and era, era appropriate. And the single we've just heard, Jazz Side of the Road, is for and about Rickie Lee Jones. So what did you find out about her during your research?
Now, Rickie Lee Jones, I first came across through Chucky's In Love.
Yeah, of course.
And I loved that kind of folky, jazzy thing. But reading about her life was extraordinary. Now, this stuff you couldn't make up. Her grandfather was a one-legged tap dancer in vaudeville called Egg Leg Jones. Now, that in itself is the song, isn't it?
Chucky's in love.
Because the Rickie Lee Jones song is the song that's out at the moment, I want to read you what she wrote to me, which is just fantastic. I mean, this is
what Rickie Lee Jones wrote to you.
Yeah, she wrote to me and she said, Sarah Jane Morris, thank you. You have gone right into my heart, like a convertible GTO at a drive-through car wash, except the top was down and everything got all wet. Mum is going to kill us. Tears today, lots of tears. Thank you for this truth. I dig it and I'm honoured.
Oh, how lovely. Oh my gosh, I mean, that just
made me cry.
I bet it did.
I found myself thinking, God, we got it right. She knows that we understood her incredible journey. and who she is.
Wow, what an incredible endorsement to kick the whole project off with. Let's pick another luminary from your Sisterhood list. How about Aretha Franklin?
So Aretha's always been in the back as a backdrop to my life, let alone my musical career.
Right.
And Aretha, her dad was he was a very famous preacher, especially during the civil rights movement, because he was very good friends with Martin Luther King. But she in a way, she was kind of used by family, but particularly by her father, to kind of take his career into a bigger domain, because she was this phenomenal gospel singer right from an early age. And he used her youth and her beauty and whatever it was to help further his career. So I kind of wanted to, in her song, show that she became far bigger than her preacher father. And she outlived all her brothers and sisters. One of her sisters, they were both wonderful singers, her sisters, and they became her backing vocalists. Well, one of them had the first hit with Piece of My Heart, which became a big hit for Janis Joplin.
Right.
But another one wrote that beautiful song, Gonna Find Me an Angel.
Ah,
so that was one of her sisters that wrote that. So it was a very musical family. But the lyrics to Aretha's chorus of her song, and by the way, what I did with her musical genre, because gospel was so important to her, it's gospel meets disco, because Aretha Franklin had a few dips in her career, a few lull moments.
Yeah.
She was forever coming back. She was forever there. But Annie Lennox's duet with her, the song that Annie wrote, which was Sisters Are Doing It of Themselves, was a disco hit.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to combine that. And her song is...
To combine those two.
As in Aretha's. And the chorus to her song is, we lock arms in sisterhood, as every other woman would, if only every woman could lock arms in sisterhood. And that's what the whole project is about.
Now there was a time when they used to say, stop doing it for themselves.
Talking of Annie Lennox, you've obviously had this connection with her, with sort of shared musicians that you have together and go back some ways. How did you sort of approach that? It's kind of different doing this sort of thing with somebody rather than somebody,
and also somebody that's living.
Exactly, somebody who has can reply if they're not happy. So how did you go about that?
Well, with the Annie song, we were thinking of that period of the 80s, the Eurythmics period, and we went for a real rock pop song. I mean, they always wrote these great choruses, but what is so phenomenal about Annie is that she's always stood up for human rights and women's rights, and she continues to this day. And she was very gender fluid, as was Kate Bush, and with all of her videos, possibly influenced by David Bowie, who knows? But they were, gender fluidity was going on there way before, a point where we're all talking about it.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to have all of that in there, but I very definitely wanted to have a whole section of the song which paid homage to that which she does for human rights. And I've called her song Voice for the Voiceless, because I believe she is a voice for the voiceless.
Besides, why can't you see?
That's Why from Annie Lennox, one of the esteemed women in the Sisterhood. The list of female singer-songwriters that have inspired our special guest Sarah J. Morris to research and then write each of them a song. And we'll be back to continue our great conversation with Sarah Jane next. Welcome back to the evening show with Jackie Brambles, where we are having a fascinating, great conversation with Sarah Jane Morris, who we first got to know, of course, as part of the Communards, but is now a renowned jazz singer in her own right and has been for a long time, and most recently been working on a project called The Sisterhood, where she's written a song for essentially her musical heroines, a list of female singer-songwriters who've inspired her along the way. So, Sarah Jane, let's pick another one from your list, Kate Bush.
So she's 1 year older than me. So in my head, she passes the torch to me. And I said, I then pass that to Sinead in the list of things, in the scheme of things. But I can remember being at drama school and we all listened to Wuthering Heights, and it was like, we'd never seen anyone dress in leotards and dance like that before on television, but we'd also never heard a voice like that. It reminded me of how everyone was blown away by the voice of Freddie Mercury when we first heard Rhapsody. It was that kind of and when I went to find out about her, there's very little out about her because she's very private. She's always been very private.
Yeah.
And she always spent years putting together these incredible albums. She was obviously a teen genius because she wrote Man with a Child in His Eyes when she was 13 years old. And I couldn't find out much through books about her or interviews. So I decided to saturate myself in her music and her lyrics to try to find out who she was. And my husband had this great idea because we were talking about child geniuses. And he said that Rimbaud, the French poet, had written all his poetry age 15. And we were talking about, how advanced these two brains were, these two minds and their use of language. And then, she grew up in the Kent suburbs. And I thought, let's call her Rambo of Suburbia. She'll know who Rambo is and she'll know how much respect we're paying her.
I hear him before I go to sleep. The man with the child in his...
Sarah Jane Morris is our special guest. We first came to know her, of course, as part of the Communards. Her new project is an album called The Sisterhood, dedicated to a group of female singer-songwriters that have inspired her. And before she sat down to write an individual song for each of these women, she did her homework to try and ensure that she captured their very essence. And what you found out about Kate Bush is that she wrote that track, Sarah Jane, Man with the Child in His Eyes, when she was just 13 years old, which is incredible. We have time to talk about one more on your list, and I think that should be Sinead O'Connor, who we so sadly lost very recently.
Sinead, I first met when I was doing a huge concert that was put on at the South Bank. We took part in something called What Women Want, and Janet Street Porter was filming it for her TV show, and it was full of remarkable women. But I met Sinead there, and we did a photo shoot. I've just had a baby. My son Otis was 3 months old. I'm in my arms. Chrissy Hind was also performing. She was there. And Sinead suddenly said, "Oh, I'm so broody. Please let me hold him." So she held him. And of course, all of the photographs that were in the press were Sinead holding Otis, but saying that was her love child.
Oh, my God.
And that was very bizarre. And
strange.
But anyway, I think she's extraordinary. I think she was incredibly brave. I think I loved particularly the music that she did with Christy Moore. But her voice was so powerful from this very, very petite body. And what I've done with her song, because she talks so much about the torture that she had as a child from her mother.
Yeah.
And how the photograph of the Pope that she tore up was on her mother's wall. That was her mother's picture of the Pope. So that was all tied up as well with her trying to, I suppose, exorcise
that childhood trauma.
But where she got to, because religion was always very important to her, was she got to forgiving her mother. Her mother obviously died when she was, she was in her teens, I think, when her mum died.
It's just so sad that she's not here, but what an extraordinary artist she was.
What a talent. What an extraordinary talent. And I'm very glad I did get to meet her.
Sinead O'Connor, Nothing Compares to You. Well, we are nearly out of time. Just time for our final track of the great conversation. Sarah Jane, over to you to pick this one. Out with the women on your Sisterhood list. Can you pick a favourite song that always moves you to get to the mood you're seeking?
A song that always does it for me, because I just when I get round to writing the lives of the men that have inspired me, this singer-songwriter will be one of them, and boy, does he have a story to tell. But I think I knew that I wanted to be something to do with music when I heard this song, and that is "If You Want Me to Stay" by Sly and the Family Stone.
Oh, wow.
I love the fact that it was so lazy. Everything they did was just behind the beat. I mean, it's very, very hard to cover something like that.
Yeah.
They just had that feeling between them. But yeah. If you want me to stay, I'll be around today. Be available, you say.
Final track of the Great Conversation Hour, Sly and the Family Stone, and If You Want Me to Stay. And what an hour it's been, talking about all these incredible women with our special guest, Sarah J. Morris. Let's remind people the album is called The Sisterhood. It's not out until March, when it'll be released on International Women's Day, followed by a spring tour. However, if it sounds awesome to you, as it does to us, you can see it being performed tomorrow night at Cadogan Hall in London. The first single from it has just been released. It's called Jazz Side of the Road. And Sarah Jane, I really think there is a book, a radio documentary and a TV series in this project.
Who knows what's ahead, but I really do hope that this project that really was born out of love and respect gets the wings that it deserves and flies off in all sorts of directions.
I'm sure it will. Listen, all the best for the concert tomorrow night and all that lies ahead. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on The Great Conversation. Keep in touch. Let us know how things develop.
Thank you, darling. I really appreciate it.
Sarah Jane Morris. What a great conversation.